Hello and welcome to the Addicts Anonymous podcast. I'm your host, Jim R. Today's episode 225, and we're going to be interviewing Josh. How you doing, Josh?
I'm doing well. How are you, Jim?
I'm doing well, doing well. I'm ready to do this. So let's dive in and get started. Tell
Okay.
me about your childhood and growing up. How was that?
I had a very great childhood. I have two very loving parents. They've been married for 56 years. I have two older sisters. They are 9 and 11 years older than me. So I was kind of like brought up as an only child. Ever since I remember, it's basically been me and my mom and dad. So, but I have loving sisters. They've supported me all throughout my life. Two wonderful brother-in-laws. They've been married. Both of the sisters have been married for over 20 years. So yeah, it was a really good childhood. I did very typical stuff. Played sports. Was involved in with my friends. Had a good group of friends, and yeah, I mean it was very typical for you know central Minnesota, smaller town, high schooler. Yeah, nothing really out of the ordinary, really.
So there were no signs or anything of what was later to come in life.
No, no, it was just very typical. I had a very good childhood. I can say that with all certainty. My family was, upper to middle class. Always had everything I needed and wanted. So it wasn't anything that would be a typical indicator that I would be using drugs down the line. My parents were both very clean people. They never really drank. Neither one smoked. Never did drugs. So yeah, there wasn't any signs that I would end up the way I ended up.
Yeah, that's good though. I mean, unfortunately, it's very rare to hear that in our community, so to speak. A lot of times I hear the horror stories. So you did good in school and all that. You said you had friends and
Yeah, I had I was a straight B student.
okay.
Nothing special. I mean, I just did what I had to do in order to stay eligible to play sports. Um, you know, I got accepted into a university, a state university in Minnesota, and I went to a junior college to play hockey instead of going to the state college. Um, so I mean, the grades they didn't really mean a lot to me. I didn't really have high aspirations to like become a doctor or anything. So I was just yeah, I was very focused on sports. So B's got me to the point where I could play, and I feel like I probably underachieved in the grades department, but that just didn't wasn't that important to me.
Yeah. So at what age were you first ever introduced to any type of drug or alcohol?
Well, I was introduced to alcohol and cigarettes at 13. Um,
By
it was
who?
very a cousin,
Okay.
cousin and friends that were just a little bit older than me, and I actually moved from the city's area down by Minneapolis up to the northern central Minnesota area into a smaller town, and that was in seventh grade. And by eighth grade, I had drank. I had drank to the point of getting sick. But yeah, it was fairly young. I mean, but at the same time, I don't think it was way out of the ordinary for my area. I guess that's all I can speak upon. But started drinking with friends quite a bit when I got to high school, and then I think it really started escalating to drinking probably every weekend when I was on the varsity hockey team as a sophomore.
Do you
Um,
remember what it felt like the first time you ever used?
yeah, what it felt like to me, because the reason I mentioned the moving to a different school was that I really felt um, alone. I felt like I wasn't accepted, and when I would drink, I ended up with a new set of friends. Like the people that would do the partying on the weekends, and that was where I felt that acceptance when I would drink or when I would party. It was that I was back in, I was in a cool group again, and it felt, pretty good. It gave me that confidence to be in a group that I had been trying to get into, trying to be accepted. And then when I started to experiment more with alcohol, that's where I ended up getting that reassurance.
So it was about making friends and stuff.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
that's pretty much it wasn't direct, but it's pretty much the definition of peer pressure. You're doing it to try to
right.
fit in.
Yeah, because like I said, I had struggled for at least 2 years with trying to fit in with a group of friends my age. I had neighbors and friends from the neighborhood that weren't all my age, and they were close friends, but I didn't really fit into the in group until I really started to drink.
So how heavy was your drinking during high school?
I mean, looking back, it was probably pretty heavy. You know, at the time, I didn't think I was drinking any more than anyone else. But there again, I was around the people that drank. I just assumed that everybody drank, that, but then I didn't realize that I was in a class of, 250 kids, and I was basing that off of like the 60 that, I would hang out with. But little to my knowledge, there's a big group, a majority of them that didn't do what I was doing, but I didn't consider wanting to be a part of the other group. The other group didn't play sports, concentrated on grades. We're a part of like other groups in the high school, like FFA or like a debate team, things like that. I had no interest in doing that. And so, when you were an athlete, it seemed to be more prevalent to be using alcohol.
So you were pretty much trying to fit in with the culture.
Yeah, I would say so. And then once I fit in, then it was just normal for me. It was normal to figure out where the next party was or what we were going to do on the weekends. And, it was just that I was in that group, then it became normal. And so I don't even know if it was necessarily fitting in at that point. It was just, that's the way it was. And, it felt good to be a part of that. It was a part of something, not only was a part of, the hockey team, which was what my main sport was. That felt really good to be accepted in there. But then on top of that, to be out partying with other people that looked up to the hockey players, that was one of those, another form of acceptance and status. Later down the road, I'd figure out that I always needed this pat on the back or this acceptance that I was good or that I was popular in order to feel good about myself. And I didn't know it at the time, but down the road, I look back and that was very true.
Yeah, I mean, it's a form of fitting. We all have that feeling, I think. I think it's just natural in human beings to want to fit in somewhere.
Yeah.
So do you remember, might be a silly question, but do you remember like actually how much you would drink? Like, would it be 6 beers? Would it be 10 beers?
I think the standard was about 8.
Okay.
Like that was about my tipping point. I think, if I had any more than 8, it was going to be a rough go, like it was going to be tough mornings. And unfortunately back then I drove. That was the other thing, is that I felt like I had no problem driving when I had 8. If I was staying at a place, or if I didn't have to go home or drive anywhere, then I'd probably let loose and I'd get closer to 12, 14 beers. And then once hard liquor started coming in, that's when it really started to escalate to where I would get very drunk, blackout type drunk, and getting sick, puking, stuff like that. But I really never looked at it as like it was a sign or it was something that was abnormal, because there was always somebody that was known as that. That night, well, somebody else did it, there was always somebody that was doing it. And, looking back, it probably was, I was probably the one that was doing it more often than others, getting to that point.
So when did hard liquor get introduced into the mix?
It was later high school, probably junior, senior year.
Oh, so it
I
was
didn't,
still that young.
yeah, but I didn't like the taste of it. I just like the effects of it.
Yeah, me
The
too. I was a drinker,
yeah,
and I used to hold my breath, so I didn't taste it at first.
right, yeah, because it's harsh.
Oh yeah,
Even the beer would be, considered not good to me. I didn't like it necessarily. It wasn't for the taste. I wasn't drinking it for the taste. I was
exactly.
drinking for the effects and to fit in.
Yeah, same thing here. I would definitely drink just for the effects. I mean, I
Yeah.
I was an alcoholic who hated the taste. I mean, unless you made like a drink, like a mixed drink that's good to taste. But other than that, straight alcohol is disgusting.
Yes. Yeah. I found that out quick. Yeah.
Yeah, but yet we drink it.
Yeah. And I think the one that I really drank quite a bit was whiskey. I'd mix it, whiskey
Me too.
cokes. That was the one that I leaned on quite a bit when I was younger. I switched to vodka later on in my life. That was the go-to, but it was definitely, there was a tip. I always went with the theory, uh, beer before liquor, never been sicker. As
Liquor
silly as
before
it
beer, and
sounds.
you're in the clear.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'd always get that base of beer and then switch to the liquor.
Oh, I was the garbage can. I didn't have any rhyme or reason. I just drank what I could.
Yeah,
But I mostly, like you said, went for the liquor only because it was less drinking and more effect.
right.
Instead of drinking an entire beer, I could just do one little shot and have the same effect as one beer.
Yeah, and then that it was quick. If you did shots, you were gonna get there quicker.
Yeah,
Um, and ultimately, I didn't like the taste enough to really want to enjoy it. Like just sit back and have a few beers and let it just. If I was drinking, I was drinking to get drunk. There was a lot of people that would just drink to be social.
yeah.
Um, I wasn't one of those. I was the one that wanted to play drinking games and beer bongs and things like that.
So what'd you do once you graduated high school? You went
I
to
went to play.
junior college, you said, and you were playing hockey.
Yeah, I went to junior college, majored in hockey, and my grades showed that. I didn't really get much out of that first year. Then I moved back to my hometown and started going to school at a junior college close to there, and it didn't have hockey. And then I started coaching hockey. So as soon as I stopped playing, I started coaching, which is what I did for the next, well, over 13 years.
You did it on the side from
I was
besides.
doing, yeah, coaching. Um, it would be the youth, and then I ended up at St. Cloud State to get a teaching degree, and I did. And then I was a social studies teacher and a head high school coach. So once I got back to my hometown and realized I wasn't going to play anymore, I started coaching, and that's what made me want to be a teacher. So I just focused on that. Um, I did lead a little bit of the college life that I'm thinking was living in the dorms. I never did that. I lived at home and was doing junior college work, and then working on the side. A lot of my jobs were like at the arena and working as somebody that zamboni the ice or things like that. Um, so I focused on school, and after my first year, I ended up getting pretty good grades, and then that transferred to St. Cloud State, where I was able to go on and get my teaching degree. And I did spend 7 years in college to get a 4-year degree. So It wasn't like I was really focused on school, but in time it worked out, and I I enjoyed my time in college. I mean, there was a lot of partying in college. I lived with high school friends, and when you live with your buddies, there's four of us. It was easy to, when we had a house, it was easy to throw a party and invite not only our old high school friends, but our college friends and our friends that we met at our jobs. And I just did a lot of things. Like I worked at the baseball fields in St. Cloud, and there was a big group. It was baseball fields and a golf course, and everybody that was hired there was either a former hockey player or a current hockey player, um, some baseball players, but all athletes. And we all had the same interests, and work hard, play hard, and then go to school and get it done. And that's the way it was for, I'd say until I was 23. And I still had, at that time, was him and hawing between business and teaching. And then I did eventually just switch my major to teaching. And that's when I met a girl that ended up being my wife. And that helped slow things down a little bit. Not a lot, but it did definitely result in me being um, a little more careful with how much I was drinking. But that sure didn't end it for me. I mean, I was still drinking quite a lot. And that's when I started to dabble in cocaine. And actually, I was dabbling in cocaine before I met my future wife. But after I met her, that's when that stopped pretty fast.
So how much would you drink? Was it daily?
Yeah, I mean, it was at least 5 days a week. Um, we lived we lived very close to a bar. It wasn't like the downtown bars. It was just like a little neighborhood bar, and we would be there almost every night. Playing golden tee or playing pool or throwing darts. There was always meal specials or like burger specials. That's what I ate. That's what I lived off of. For a while there, it was wings, and every night there was a different bar that had wings deals. It's 10-cent wings or 15-cent wings at the next bar. But that was what my dinners were all the time. And always when you go to have wings, you got to stay after to have about 10 beers. And and then you start experiment with other drinks. White Russians was one of my favorite drinks. And it was at least 5 days a week. Some days we'd go all week. And maybe
Just out of curiosity, what's in the White Russian?
Vodka, Kahlua, and or vodka, Kahlua, and cream. So that was my drink. But I was always, for some reason, I'd always get real mean when I drink that. That was not a drink that people like to see me drink, because I would get mean. So I limited that too. But I mean, that's vodka. That's when I was drinking more vodka than anything, because I would drink Red Bull vodkas and you can stay up later. You know,
Yeah.
you didn't have cocaine, you could just drink Red Bull vodkas and be watching the sunrise. And if I was drinking hard, I was wanting to party all night if I could.
So once you graduated college, what'd you do with your life?
I went on to become a high school social studies teacher and a hockey coach. I coached baseball, I coached soccer, but I was the head coach for the high school hockey team in Faribault, Minnesota. And I got married right before I took on the job of social studies teacher and hockey coach. So my wife and I moved to the town, where we didn't know anybody. I was 27 or 26, I think, and taking over a high school program. And yeah, life was good. Life was really good. My ex-wife was she majored in health, the health field. And so she had a job working for Health Partners. up in the cities, and we were about 50 miles away. So she would commute. I would be home. But when I were coaching hockey, I'd be gone until 11 o'clock at night, on game days, and on non-game days, I'd be at the arena until 7 o'clock at night. So, yeah, it was really I thought I had achieved everything at that point. I had a dream job. I had achieved that dream of becoming a high school hockey coach. I had, a teaching job where I was well respected. My first year of coaching, we set records in the school. We won more games than ever. We got to the one game away from the state tournament. We were very good. And, at one point we were like ranked in the top 5 in state. And this is a town that had never been that successful. So I obviously was receiving a lot of credit. And for somebody that has, some sort of a need for praise, it was very, it filled me up, that it made me feel good. It made me feel like I was worthy. So I wasn't drinking much that first year. Actually the first 2 years, I really didn't drink much. Maybe on the weekends, maybe I'd hook up with some other friends from high school and we'd go have some fun. But mainly I was focused on my career and coaching, and I had high aspirations to become like a college coach or a junior coach, and it seemed to be all falling in place. And then after the first year, we bought a house, got a dog, got pregnant, and yeah, it was the life was good. And what really started me off was at that point, after the second year of coaching and teaching, I had a neck injury, and I was given opiates, and I ended up becoming addicted to Oxycontin. And that's what really started the downward spiral. The opiates were what then started to fill me, it made me feel good. I loved the way it made me feel. And I was starting to spend less time thinking about hockey and more time thinking about my drugs. And I didn't even know it at first that I was so addicted, but I was very obsessed with being sure I had enough. And that was back in 2007, 2008. And then I finally had surgery in 2009. But by that time, I had switched schools. I'd wanted to get to a bigger school. So I switched schools. And the year I switched schools was when I was very addicted, and I would get sick when I didn't have them, called in sick a lot. And, my coaching suffered from it. Thank God I had good assistant coaches because they kept me afloat. But by the end of the year, even after I had surgery, they terminated my contract as a coach. And since they had tied that to my teaching contract, they also terminated my teaching contract. So then I was back to not being able to work. And not at least at that school. I applied. I just couldn't get any jobs because there wasn't many social studies jobs. And I didn't have the greatest reference from the school I was at last. And so then that's when I got off of painkillers the first time, that summer. And then my son had been born that spring. Actually the spring before, I'm sorry. The last year I was at the Fairville High School. And so then he was 1 when I ended up getting clean off of opiates. But then I was out of a job, so we were kind of stuck. But my wife's dad had died unexpectedly. And so they lived way up north. And we were running up there to take care of her mom all the time. And since I'd lost that job, we started looking up there, up in her hometown. And eventually I did get a education job. I was the director of after school activities and the Boys and Girls Club supervisor in a small northern town. So we moved up there, and then again, life was good. You know, we were in a place that I wanted to be. I was coaching hockey, not at the high school level, but you know, I like being up north. I like that feel. I'm a hunter and a fisherman. I like small town life. And so we were up there and I loved it up there and all was good until I hurt my back. And then I got prescribed opiates again, back on Oxycontin.
And what kind of effect did that have on your life? You said it started to spiral down. Like how many would you take a day? You know, were you running out of prescriptions?
Yeah, it was at first it was, well, it reminded me of the feeling that I got. And so then I started to overuse pretty much right away. And then it was the manipulation of the doctor, you know, try and tell them that I ran out, or that I lost them, or that I destroyed them, or, you know, all kinds of lies. And it was, you know, 2 years after I moved there, I was a full-fledged addict. And that's when I finally had surgery to repair the pain source. I had a lower back fusion of L4 through S1. And after my surgery is when it was really bad. I was doing things to get more pills when I shouldn't have. I actually ended up forging, or I scribbled out a date that was put on a prescription that said did not fill to until, and I did that, and I ended up getting a charge for felony. I can't remember what it was. It was a felony drug charge, really, what it was, for fraudulently altering a prescription. Thankfully, I had enough backing to where the judge gave me a stay of adjudication, and I was able to stay on probation. That's when I got clean and sober for which I thought was the last time. I went to Hazelden, had a lapse, ended up drinking because I found if I drank enough vodka, I could feel the same effects that I felt with opiates, but I hadn't drank a lot of vodka. I was drinking about a 1.75 a day.
Wow.
And that's what almost led to my marriage ending the first time. But she took me back. I got sober. I had lost my job as the after school program coordinator, and I had to start from zero again. So I ended up becoming a paraprofessional in a classroom, working with a student that had autism. And that was my way of getting back on the ladder. So now I'm clean and sober. I'm back with my wife, happy. I was doing a really good job, and I ended up getting a teaching job for special ed in the special ed field. I got a special variance so that I could work as a teacher while I was getting my license as a special ed teacher. And it went from being a paraprofessional to a full-time teacher in a town probably about 40 miles away from where I lived. And then I eventually got the job at the high school where I lived. And that was ultimately where I wanted to be. Unfortunately, after 2 years of sobriety, I hurt my back again and went back and got opiates again. And that was just Vicodin, which to me was like taking a Tic Tac. But if I did enough of them, I could get a high, which I did. But I was able to manage that. I could do 2 weeks on Vicodin and then go through about a 4-day period of not feeling very good, then get my prescription at the end of the month. So it was a cycle that I was on. But then about a year after, I didn't want to do that cycle anymore. I wanted to back onto the oxy train, and then I did, and that's when things really started to fall apart. I did hold the job. I was leading a double life. I was a head golf coach, and we went to the state tournament. And 4 months later, I had stabbed myself in the stomach when I was out of pills. I was delusional. I didn't know what else to do, and I felt like I just needed a hospital stay. So I stabbed myself. As insane as that sounds, that's what happened. And at that point, my wife said that she couldn't do it anymore. And then and I, over all the years, I have come to understand and actually agree that she did the right thing, because I was out of control and she could never trust me again. So when she left me, I really fell off the rails. From that point on, that was 2015. I couldn't hold a job. I was no longer in the education field. I worked for some family friends at a boat dealership. They offered me a really solid job, and I walked away from that. I started using meth soon after she left me, because I found that after I had that stabbing incident, I just, there was no way I was going to get opiates again from doctors, and I found that they were way too expensive on the street. So I found that meth would help me with because I didn't have physical pain at that point. I had emotional pain.
Where did you
And
get the meth?
it was actually the first date I went on after my ex-wife left me.
She had meth and introduced you to it.
Met online. Yeah. Yeah. Because at that time I didn't care. I was willing to do anything. Just to numb the pain, that because I didn't want to get divorced. I didn't want to lose my family. I had two boys. I had a wonderful wife that I did not want to lose, but she was not going to take me back. And once I realized that was the case, went on that date, found that I could use meth, and I would basically, I didn't care. Meth made it so I didn't care. And that's when it really started to go bad. I mean, like really bad. I went from high school teacher to, selling meth and using meth at a really high level, and eventually started using IV drugs. And so, I mean, it was a major alteration in my life. I was
How'd you get
homeless.
into the IV use?
Again, a girl. I met a girl online, and she needed a place to stay. She was homeless, and so I went and picked her up. And obviously we found out that each other used meth before I went to go get her. Because you want to hang around people that do. And so I went and got her and brought her back home, and she asked if it was okay that she did it that way, and I had no problem with it. And I said I would never do it, but like 2 days after I picked her up, I was asking her to help me use it. So that was in 2016, and the divorce happened, or when she left me, it was November of 2015, and by must have been June of 2016, I was an IV meth user. So it was rapid.
So what did you do? I mean, what would you say was your lowest point?
Oh, I have a few of them. At one point I was nearly killed by a gang. I had been involved with a girl that had been involved with one of the gang members, and then I had won a huge jackpot up at a casino early on that summer of 2016, $30,000, and basically that's when I walked away from my job. They comped me a hotel room for as long as it took for me to lose my money back to them. So I was up there for a month, and I got to know a lot of the people up there, and I was giving money away like crazy, and then I started writing bad checks, and one of them was to the girl that I was with, and she got upset, told the gang, and her old boyfriend basically set up a hit on me, and I went out to pick up another girl in an area I shouldn't have gone to, and there was 6 of those gang members waiting for me, and um, yeah, it didn't go well. I ended up getting out of there. Luckily, um, by the grace of God, I got out of there. Uh, they stole my truck. They tried to run me down with my own truck, but yeah, I had both cheekbones were broken, both orbital bones were broken, nose was broken, 6 ribs were broken. Um, yeah, it was a mess, and that was low point number one, and then I ended up in a mental hospital after that because I told my family what happened, but I told them that I didn't dare go home because I didn't want them to follow me and hurt them. And then when I finally ended up meeting up with a high school friend, he had been in contact with my parents, and so he knew what was going on, and he convinced me to go to the hospital because of my injuries. And then that's when they put a hold on me, and I ended up staying in a mental hospital for 2 months, and then I ended up going to treatment for 2 months after that. And that treatment is where I met a lot of people, where I was able to access meth at large quantities, and then able to sell it. And that was how I lived for the next 2 years. It was really off that. No job, no place to live. I was bouncing around from one house to the other, and if you had the drugs, people were letting you stick around. So that was and I didn't see my kids for 2 years. That was probably the biggest low point, but it didn't stop me. um, I ended up so I've been to treatment 9 times. I've been arrested 9 times. um, I had at one point I was in a jail in North Dakota, and I didn't want to do it anymore. And so I told my parents that if they would come bail me out, I would go to Teen Challenge, which is a faith-based recovery program about a half hour from where my parents live, and it's a long term. So it was a 13-month program, and they had been asking me to go to that for a long time, and I couldn't do it. And I was like, I got more important things to do. I was so important at that point in my life. I didn't have 13 months to give up, when in actuality I had nothing. That was what I should have done a long time ago. And so I did that. I didn't succeed. I didn't graduate the program. I made it 10 months, but then that's when COVID hit. And when COVID hit, I was on the downward slide of my treatment. So I was at the point where there's 4 levels. I was at the end of level 3 when COVID hit, and at level 4, you usually get a lot of passes. You get out every Saturday for 8 hours. You get a chance to start going to look for jobs. I mean, level 4, you weren't in the building very much anymore. It was more like you were just at a group residential housing situation. And I was craving that. I needed that because I wanted to get out of the building. I wanted to start my life over. At that point, I didn't want to use drugs anymore. But then everything shut down once COVID hit. Not only did I not get to do the passes or get to go out look for jobs, we didn't even get to have visitors anymore. And it was awful. And I didn't handle it well. I became one of the things I learned about myself was that there are thermometers in the world, and there's thermostats in the world, and I'm a thermostat. I can set the temperature of any room, and I was a leader in there. And when I went south, they could see that the whole treatment center was going south because of me. And so they finally just discharged me. They didn't kick me out; they discharged me. So I always say I got a dishonorable discharge from Teen Challenge. But that, thankfully that relationship has been mended, and I'm actually going there and speaking on a regular basis now. So, but that was 2020, and I got out. I don't like saying get out. That's like I was in jail. I was dismissed from the program, and so I went back home, lived with my mom and dad, started working again, was clean and sober, and then I realized that life was boring, and so I went back and started using again, and that was pretty quick. That happened pretty quick because I also made a lot of friends in that treatment center, and when you're in a 13-month program, you don't get there by smoking pot on the weekends. I mean, this is a lot of people that have been to the bottom a lot of times, you know, that their lives were completely out of control. Like they were looking, there's a lot of guys looking at long prison sentences. They were able to get to Teen Challenge for rehabilitation rather than being sentenced and being adjudicated guilty for whatever crime they had, and they were allowed a second chance. And so when you got a 60, because there's 60 guys in there, you have quite a few people that have been really deep into the drug world that have a lot of connections. And as soon as I started when I got out and I started using again, I reached out and found it's very easy to get a large quantity and very easy to get enough to start selling again and be able to supply or to feed my habit, you know, to keep me going. And that probably leads to the ultimate rock bottom was March of 2021. So about a year after COVID hit, I had fallen asleep behind the wheel on a freeway, and I was going about 70, and I hit a school bus that was being towed, and it just pulled onto the highway. So it was probably going maybe 5-10 miles an hour, and I was going 70. And I shouldn't have survived the accident. I shouldn't be walking today, but for some reason I am, and you know, I know the reason now. But I had to go through a lot during that period of rehabbing that, and I actually was supposed to be on my way to go pick up my son to take him to a hockey game, and well, I was on my way home so I could sleep before I had to go take him home or take him to the hockey game. And during my hospital stay, I had some horrible dreams about the accident. I had the L1 burst fracture, or a burst fracture of the L1 vertebrae. So they had to do emergency surgery and basically fuse my back from my shoulder blades to my belt line. And so I was in a substantial amount of pain. I broke my sternum, I broke my collarbone, and I ended up having 45 stitches in staples in my back. I have about a foot and a half long scar going up my spine. Is when that's when they did the emergency surgery. And then I had another 10 staples in my head from the accident. But the one dream that really was about as hard as it was when I dreamt that I had killed my son in that car accident, you know, and I woke up and just total chaos, total panic, trying to get a hold of a nurse, trying to find out what happened to my son. And so that was really hard for me. I ended up getting a DUI out of it, and I didn't find out until about 8 months later. And so I'm still, you know, I'm on probation, and I got a intox lock, and I've had to pay a lot of fines, a lot of expensive stuff for driving. And so I think if you want to ask the rock bottom question, that was probably it. When that happened, you know, I was going so hard and trying to burn the candle at both ends. And, you know, I had been away from my kids for so long. I had missed, because the year before that it was in treatment, so I couldn't really go watch their games. And then that year I was able to go. Well, I was high when I was going, but I was trying to stay functional. And again, the meth was used as a uh, for medicinal purposes a lot, because it wasn't really getting me high anymore. It was just making me forget, or helping me forget. And that's ultimately what I was chasing. And yeah, so that was March of 21.
So when was what was the driving force of you getting sober? When did you say to yourself, I can't do this anymore, and led you to sobriety?
Well, I always say that my recovery journey started when I was in that prison, or that jail in North Dakota in 2019. Um, I was actually trying to kill myself the day I was arrested. I was trying to get a hold of heroin so that I could get enough heroin in order to overdose. It was my wedding anniversary. I was stuck out in North Dakota. I had been there for about 2 weeks, and that day, June 25th, 2019, I wanted to die. And so when I went to jail and I was not able to die, I I started I started reaching back into my faith, because I was brought up a Christian. I had a strong faith. I believed in God, but for the 3 years previous to that, I was angry with God. I didn't want anything to do with God, and at that point, um, I asked God to take over. I couldn't do it anymore. I just said, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to live like this. This is not me. I really was, I was disgusted with myself. And I knew that in order to change, I wasn't going to be able to do it on my own. I needed that faith. And so I think that's when I really started that recovery journey. Now, I did have that long relapse right before my car accident. That was about 4 months long. But that, again, I was after I had been discharged from Teen Challenge, and I was angry. Um, I was white knuckling it for 4 months after I got discharged. Um, but then finally, I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. I still was not grieving the loss of my marriage. I was still angry at my ex-wife. I was still angry at the world. I had major resentments. I was just saying I was okay. Even though I wanted to not do that anymore, deep down inside, I had this just awful feeling about myself, about people around me, about God. And and so then when I went back, I realized that I wouldn't have to worry about it anymore. I didn't have to be I didn't have to be sad. That was the emotion that I was truly running from, is sadness and grieving. And I had tried some mental health therapy a couple times. I just didn't want to do it. I knew that, I always would say, try to explain to people that, when you're depressed, you go into the doctor and they say, here's some Prozac and you'll feel better in about a month. It takes a while for this drug to really take hold. And I'd say, you know what? I can take and put methamphetamines in my veins and I'll feel better right now. I just don't understand the concept. I didn't have any patience. I didn't want to wait that long. So it was easy for me to just go back out and get it. If it came to the point where I wasn't able to handle the sadness. My ex-wife had found somebody new and they were living together, and it was very hard for me. I don't blame her for that. She needed to move on with her life. And but at the time I was very angry, and I was angry that she gave up on me. Um, and that anger was not deservedly going towards her. That anger really deep in me was at myself for screwing up such a wonderful opportunity. What a wonderful wife, wonderful family, wonderful career, and I just had done everything to just throw it away. And I was angry at the doctors, and I was angry at Purdue Pharma. I was angry at the treatment centers that didn't help me before, and I just found that it was easier to just go back to meth, even though I didn't want to. I just was really determined to get away from the the feelings I was going through. And that's the one thing and all the time now that after that accident, I've worked with addicts, those stuck in addiction and those in early recovery. I would work with them about understanding what it is that we were doing it for, why we were actually going to use versus to find sobriety. And that's when I really started to examine what it was that I was running from. And the only way I figured I could beat this was to ask God for help, understand that God forgave me the minute I did it, and then start working on forgiving myself. And that's when the light bulb went off in my head, really, was when I started forgiving myself. And then I started to realize that I don't have to hinge my worthiness on whether or not somebody forgives me. It didn't have to come from my ex-wife. I didn't have to have her take me back in order to be sober. I could do it because I was worthy. And that's what I worked on I've been working on for the last 2 years, basically, a year and 10 months or so. And yeah, I mean, it's been a journey, but you learn a lot about yourself when it comes to why you did it. Why did I do all that I did? And learning some of that has helped me forgive myself. It's not like it's not a scapegoat. I did what I did. I accept that, and I'm not going to forget it, but I'm going to forgive myself. And I don't have to live in shame anymore of what happened, because honestly, I believe that this is what the path that God wanted me to go now. Now my career goal now is to be somebody who's working directly with families or those stuck in addiction to get them the help they need. In order to do that, I had to walk that. I had to go through all those years of hell that I did so that I could understand better. And that's where I feel like now I'm a much better person than I ever was, even before I started using drugs. I have more empathy, I have more compassion, and I have more passion for what I want to do. And I now consider all of those years, all of those decisions, those jail stays, those treatment stays, they're all a blessing to me. That I know more about myself because of them.
So how long have you been sober now?
It's been, I'm not really big on dates. It was about a year and 2 months ago or something. I had a lapse. I had a lapse, in that area. It was short lived. It was nothing substantial. I've been working with. I just got my certification to become a peer recovery specialist. Somebody that they call them recovery coaches too, but somebody that comes alongside somebody that's looking for sobriety. And the one thing we talk about is that there's so much shame in the reusing. That's the term that they're going with now, not a relapse, it's a reuse. And I'm a big supporter of the Alcoholics Anonymous program, the Addicts Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, all of those. I just don't put a lot of stock in the years, the days, the months. My recovery journey began on June 25th of 2019, and I've had some bumps in the road, but I'm not gonna lose sleep over a couple of use periods over that time, because I'm not still in it. I may have dipped my toe back in the water, but I didn't fully go into it. And deep down in my heart, I wanted to be sober. And June 25th, 2019, that was the first time that happened. And so when it comes to sober time, I believe that over the last what is that, 3.5 years, I've had so much sober time versus using time, maybe 4.5 months of really using time out of 40 months, maybe. So maybe 10% of it. And so I don't really consider using for a weekend as something that disqualifies me for my recovery journey, and that's different with everybody, that's, and one of the messages, one of the reasons I want that to be known so much is that I've known so many guys and girls that had substantial sobriety, and they drank one weekend and it made them spiral so bad, and it ended up being a 2-year relapse because they were so ashamed of the fact that they used once. And I want to try and change that narrative so that people don't feel like they have to be ashamed of themselves if they have a slip. And that's important to me because part of why I didn't stop in 2020 and 21 before my accident was because I didn't want to admit it. I had admitted it to some of my friends, but I was afraid to admit it to others because I felt like others were just going to look at me and go, well, that's Josh doing Josh again. And so yeah, long story short, I it's over a year now, but I don't think that last one really should count in a way. It doesn't define me, I guess. But at the same time, I shouldn't be afraid to say, that's just how long I have, because to me it doesn't matter. Part of the reason why I hesitate on the actual time is because I don't really know. It didn't mean that much to me, when I used last. And it wasn't, like you said, it was that, when did you really want to stop using? That's the date that sticks in my head. That's the date where my life changed. And that's why I do a lot of work for Teen Challenge, because I credit them for changing my life. They planted seeds in me about how to live sober, about the forgiveness process that never had been in my life before. And so it was easier for me to, if I did use, to turn back. And that's partly what I want to convey to people, is that I'm not giving people the free pass to go back out and use, because I was miserable when I did. That's how I tell people, after you've made this commitment to be sober and you go out and you try and do it again, the party's over. Because once you've really changed your mindset and you go back out there and try to use again, it's no fun. You constantly are beating yourself up. And then you use in order to get through that part of beating yourself up. And it's a vicious cycle. So, when I'm working with guys, I tell them that. I tell them that this is what will happen once you've already made that commitment to yourself. It's just not going to be any fun. And I'm not the only one that's gone through that program and has tried to go back out and use again. Every one of us say the same thing. It's not fun. It's just, it really is that, for me, it was that piece of being bored and then using, and then being so ashamed of myself that I would stay using because of it. So I don't know, that's a long answer to a very basic question, so I apologize for that.
No apologies necessary. I appreciate everything you've opened up to us about. So, almost at the end, let me ask you one last question. Do you have any advice for people watching and listening?
This is what I say a lot, as I just say, don't ever give up. And that is a message to both family and those stuck in use, is that I was loved through my addiction. My family never stopped loving me. And if it hadn't been for that, I would have killed myself a number of years ago. so many times it's easy to stop, to forget that inside there is that person you once loved, or if it's yourself, inside of there, there's that good person you once were. um, you're not a bad person. You're being basically possessed by a chemical, and it's making you into somebody you never intended to be. You know, we all at one point had a childhood where we were able to go out and have fun, throw the ball around, you know, play games with friends, watch cartoons, you know, love our parents, be loved by people. Um, there are some that were unfortunate to not have that, but they still were a child. You know, they still were an innocent person, and inside of all of us is still that person, and we're worth it. You know, that's the thing, is that I always tell people we are worth it. I mean, a lot of times, you know, the climate is changing a little bit on how people look at addiction, but for the longest time we was looked at like we were choosing to be bad people, and that's not the case. Nobody wants to do what I've done. You know, I just, you're sick. You know, it's like that old saying in AA: you're not bad getting good. You're sick getting well. You know, that's the thing, is that if you have somebody who's has cancer and they're going to do treatment, that's them taking their life back, and nobody looks at them in a negative light. But for an addict, we end up having this, you know, this stigma that keeps us looking at like what's wrong with us. And if I could just do one thing for all those that are stuck in addiction, I would just say never give up, and don't stop loving. Love is what defeats addiction. Love from others, love from God, loving of self, knowing your worthiness. And if you're a family member who's watching this because you have a loved one stuck in addiction, you don't know what else to do, send them a message, not shaming them, not telling them they need to get help, but just telling them that you love them, you're thinking about them, and if they ever want to talk to you, your phone's always on. If they want to go get lunch, go buy them lunch. You're not enabling if you just get them some food. You know, that shows love. And that's what when we're stuck in addiction and alcoholism, that's what we lack. And I hope that people will take that and run with it, because it's very important. I know it was for me, and I'm sure everybody else that has gone through the hell of addiction would say the same thing, that a loving message or an act of kindness is what kept them alive. And that's really what I want to be, is I want to be that light of hope for those that are stuck in it, and those family members that are stuck in it, because the family members need to see that there is hope out there. And I want to live that hope out for people, and so that people look at me and say, I want that. I want to get to that point. And that's now my driving force. That, my kids, my girlfriend, you know, my parents, all of that is what drives me now, is because I realized that they loved me through this journey that I was on, and that I am on. You know, I'll always be on this recovery journey, and that's used to be a real negative thought in my mind, but now I'm excited about it. So
That's great. Glad to hear you're doing so well.
thank you.
So did you have anything else that you wanted to throw in here?
No, you know, other than anybody that's stuck in addiction, you know, don't be afraid to reach out your hand. You know, I would be, I'm always wanting people to reach out for me, to me, so that I can help. Um, find a meeting, find somebody that has gone through what you've gone through. Find somebody that's in the, you know, if you have mental health problems, ask for help, and they will help you. And build your worthiness back up. And don't forget that people do love you, and that's important.
Absolutely. I mean, love drives everything. I mean, I think if you don't have love in your life, it's a very empty life.
Yes, very
Yeah,
much so. And that's what happens when you study. When you love the drug more than the others, it's a dark place.
very dark place.
Yeah.
All right, my friend. So hang tight for me. I'm going to wrap the show up here. And for everybody watching and listening, if you like what you saw and heard, go below and give us a like. Also, subscribe to see when we upload new videos. We're on all social media, such as Twitter, Reddit, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. As I say, you name it, we're probably on it. I also suggest checking out our website, which is www.addicts-anonymous.com. There's plenty of free resources as well as free literature. Also, Addicts Anonymous has a book coming out, due out next February or this February, hopefully by the mid to late February. It's called Addicts Anonymous, Our Stories. I write on a number of topics as well as a collection of people's stories. So that's all we have for today's podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. And until next time.